We have, as you probably know, this track record at Supergiant Games of jumping constantly to a new world and having trouble staying focused on something that we've done before. We want something new, we want new creative challenges, and when it came to Hades, we really had to ask ourselves, are we ready to leave this behind? One of the challenges going from being a studio that doesn't make sequels to suddenly making a sequel is that you have all these internal and external pressures that are placed on you. And I remember early on in development thinking, you know, the goal isn't to make something better. It's to make something that stands up on its own legs, just like every other game we've ever made. It's the same approach. And yet, 3 years later, I can look at what we've made together and I can say, actually, that is better. And that came as a surprise to me because for me, doing something the same, but just with all the different contexts, new worlds, new stories that Greg's gonna tell, all these new relationships, all that stuff is already enough to make a new game. And being a 2D studio, we're already performing at what we think is our peak when we're making those games and in those styles. And it is a great pleasure, and I'm so proud of the art team to find that that wasn't our peak at all. And like the work Joanne Tran, our environment artist, is doing is just incredible. You're gonna see biomes that it's like, you've never seen anything like that in a Supergiant game. And like when we saw it ourselves, we were like, so cool. And our 3D team had a whole set of new challenges to deal with this time around because we transitioned from being an actual 2D engine to one that's like a little bit more 2.5D because we have real 3D tools this time around. So there was a side challenge there of emulating the old game using completely new tools. And it went off without a hitch. Like, it's incredible, I think, because a lot of people don't notice, but I think people are still feeling the upgrade and they're feeling the difference and they're feeling all the extra work and refinement that is being put into Hades 2. So yeah, I'm just really proud of the art team, but also the team as a whole.
Death to Kronos. I'll see to that. No one is more prepared.
So when it came to designing Melinoë, it was actually a hyper-focused process because in the pre-production process for Hades, we knew we wanted to tell a story about Zagreus' sister. So we know who Zagreus is, we know who Melinoë's father is, we know so much about their family, and we also have the actual source material from Greek mythology to pull from. So it was actually a very narrow set of problems that I got to solve when I designed her. In the early portions of our pre-production pipeline, I often do something called mood paintings, where I'm not trying to get too specific. I'm just trying to capture the tone and the mood of our game and the general ideas around it. So it's like, okay, we know we want to tell this story about this witch, Melinoë, and she is Zagreus' sister, and she has her own story, and because of all of that, there's this tone that's going to come with her that's very different from what we did in Hades. For her, I created these mood paintings that, you know, already had this female protagonist in all of them. We knew about Hecate already, so we wanted to describe that relationship in the art too. So actually, one of the very first mood paintings I ever put together has a design that is very close to the design we ended up shipping into what you see now. As far as my research was concerned with designing Melinoë, there's actually not a lot out there. There are some blurbs out there. There is an Orphic hymn out there that describes Melinoë, and it's very enchanting, very mysterious. It describes her as this saffron-cloaked nymph who is sometimes light and sometimes dark, and it's just very, it's very evocative. But there are not actually very many depictions of her, if any at all, I think. But I really enjoy this particular process where there is like a rough outline with a couple features that are absolutely necessary, but then that you can massage into a puzzle piece that fits the broader context of the game more powerfully. So that was really an exciting part of the design process for me. Being saffron cloaked, was non-negotiable, and that she was recognizable as a family member of Hades. So she has the flaming feet, she has the flaming laurels, she has the mismatched eyes. Those were things that I knew I absolutely wanted in her design. That she was a witch was really important as well. I wanted people to understand that just looking at her. It's like, what is this game about? You want to immediately understand, hey, I think there are witches involved. That she's tied to the moon. I haven't mentioned the moon. She was a moon goddess, so that was incredibly important. It's there front and center on her forehead. So I'd say that about sums up the tent poles of the Melinoë character design process.
In the name of Hades, Olympus, I accept this message.
Long lost niece, you live! We thought you met the same fate as your father, and your mother, and your brother. Oh. Well, how about we turn the tide and exact terrible revenge for poor old Hades and his kin?
Redesigning characters is one of my favorite things to do. Getting to do a time skip is like the ultimate, I don't know, creative juice for me. This may sound conceited, but it's almost like you get to do fan art of your own work. And you get to look at it and say, oh, there are all these other takes. There's all these other approaches I could have taken. And you can go back and actually do them. So that's not to say that there isn't a really important part of the creative process, which is talking to Greg and making sure all the changes we're making have a reason behind them. Making a character look different for being different's sake is not particularly appealing. It's not creatively inspiring. So Greg is an amazing writer, and he does this fantastic job of setting me up with just enough information to help me make what I hope are fantastic creative design solutions to show how a character may have changed over the course of the time between Hades 1 and Hades 2.
What's she doing here?
One word of this to Hecate and you're meat. Got it? Now go on while I take care of things.
Nemesis was really fun because we've just never designed a character like her. And she has that like mysterious, intimidating, yet alluring appeal, I hope. I hope people think she has that.
Time forced our hand, Melinoë. Nary a soul expected you to slay our enemy last night on a new moon, no less. But you accomplished something of great impact.
Hecate's design came about as a result of our typical creative process, I think, which is that, like I said, Greg is fantastic. I asked him, oh, what color would their underwear be, or what's their favorite food for breakfast, and Greg will have an answer for me. So in this case, those are not the questions I asked, but he described this mentor figure, essentially, for Melinoë, and we knew Hecate she's the goddess of magic, the Greek goddess of magic. She is, I think, extremely well known in the more occult circles. So there are aspects of Hecate we absolutely knew we wanted to represent. So it was like her threefold nature, the triple goddess. She has these faces on her shoulder pads, her pauldrons. She was a very powerful witch. So therefore, a witch's hat. Nothing says powerful witch more than a witch's hat in ancient Greece, right? But in her case, there is a very specific reference that I drew from my own personal interests, and it was this Sargent painting of a woman, I believe, from North Africa, so like a Berber woman. It's a very famous painting. She has this white like robe pulled over her head, and I remember when Greg described this character, I remember thinking, oh, I want to evoke some of that. She's standing over this incense, and it's like just very, even though this painting is in broad daylight, it's just extremely mysterious. So I wanted to inject some of that into Hecate when I designed her. So I basically took some of those ideas, like the Berber jewelry even, and I thought it was very appropriate actually to include some of those fringe cultures, ones that are physically, within the realm of reason you could imagine them interacting with Greece back then. Because we were talking about a game about witches, and witches have traditionally always been on the fringes of society.
You, my girl, are meddling in matters you do not understand. Your father made certain choices. He was bound by them. But you are not. You need not follow in his ruinous path.
We often see Kronos depicted as this healthy, hale, old man. And I thought it would be so interesting if we tried a different approach. Because if I were old, and I were immortal and the god of time, I'd probably be tired of everything. and maybe stop doing things like eating even. And especially because Kronos has that interesting lore where he like ate all of his children. It was interesting to kind of play with his body type for me. And I designed him as this ascetic, essentially. He's beyond like the mortal realm.
Great Titaness, the Eye of Night, I draw you down. Lend me your might.
Good evening to you, little star. Our cycles now are intertwined, as I no longer can afford merely to watch. Whichever threat we face, I vow to shine for you.
I think my favorite may actually be Melinoë, because in a game where we are constantly invoking the moon and talking about the moon and their moon thematics everywhere, it was really satisfying to eventually design, okay, like what does the actual moon in this game feel like? How are all these other characters tied together visually to this one particular character? Because we have several moon goddesses like Artemis and Hecate and Melinoë, Selene. So there are ties, and there's even a way that we're lighting a lot of the assets in the entire game that it was really fun for me to finally like tie the knot, pull the thread tight there. Internally, there's like colorful highlights that we used in Hades and in Hades 2. We call them Skittles. And so, you know, I changed the color of the Skittles in this game, and they are more of this kind of like warm and cool moonlight tones. And to finally create the character that embodies that was like really exciting for me, I'd say. So that was really fun. I think she's my favorite character so far. As far as characters that are coming soon, there are characters that are robed that we will definitely be updating their portraits for, but beyond that, I cannot say.
The cauldron's ready for me now.
So the Crossroads, the design of the Crossroads, we knew we were making this rebel faction. Telling a story about this rebel faction, essentially. So what better place to have a rebel faction than in a bog? But really, the tone of it really fit our needs. And also, we wanted to make a distinction from Hades, where everything was like this structured, like built up Greek architecture setting. And we liked that contrast with this more natural surrounding that you see in the Crossroads. So we were very thoughtful about making sure like, oh, there's not like a lot of straight lines in this area, because that was everything that we did in Hades. Straight walks this way, straight hallways over here and here and here. So in service of the tone and the mood we were trying to set, the bog seemed perfect. Like we knew the river Cocytus was going to feature in the Crossroads, and so we had to think about, okay, well, we have this blood river in this original game, and so what does this river look like? And just looking for a feel that seemed to fit the story and to fit the larger Hades tapestry as a whole.
Who dares disturb my eternal rest? You trifle with powers far beyond your comprehension, witch. Speak!
That was pretty decent, right, Mel? Maybe pushing it. Okay if I call you witch like that?
Ever since Bastion, Transistor, I've been floored by the amount of warmth and creativity and dedication that comes from our community. They are truly incredible people. I think we are one of very few game developers who can say that about their community. For whatever reason, we've earned that from our fans, and we hope we can give it right back to them. I am shocked at the speed at which people produce fan art of these characters. It is impressive. There's so much talent out there. It's humbling, it's awing, and though to a certain degree, I do think it will be probably important to put on blinders to some extent, specifically so that my creative process doesn't become influenced. Because the community, like I said, it's vibrant and thriving, and it grows on its own, and they have their own canons, they have their own ideas of exactly what's gonna happen to this character and how they're gonna change, and some of that stuff is really cool. And if I see it, I can't unsee it. So as a creative, I wanna make sure that I am reaching my creative destinations through an honest process that comes internally and working with Greg and Amir and the rest of the creative group. It's not a new phenomena, but I think simply the volume of just how large our community is now will require me to be a bit more strict about that.
The Fates themselves knew Kronos would be overthrown by his own kin. We've done it before, and we're going to do it again.
Great thing, I think, about working here and having our community is that, of course, the community members, when they're providing feedback, they have good ideas. Can we do them, and do they fit within the rest of the context that we're thinking about? No. Do we have time? Maybe not. But there are moments where you'll just read the feedback, and it will be a fantastic idea, and you think, oh, actually, that's a great change. Let me go ahead and do that. I don't know that there's been anything like that for a character design, but certainly I think for like a room reward or something that has happened before. Yeah, so being in early access can be uncomfortable, but I'd say knowing that we have such a loving and supporting community out there, it gives me confidence in what we're doing. I am so humbled that we even have a community like that supports us in this way and seems to trust us. The player base is also familiar with our attentiveness to them, as well as our ability to listen to our own creative voice. I am intimidated by the volume of people. I hope they are kind, and if they are not, I will just put my blinders on.